Well, good morning still, everybody. We are now live on Facebook with the Pearland Chamber of Commerce's Business and Entrepreneur Series. I'll be candid, I'm super excited about our presentation today in our series. Let's talk about it. For those who don't know me, my name is Jim Johnson. I'm the president and CEO with the Pearland Chamber. And every third Friday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, we bring together myself as well as Kiana James, our vice chair and committee chair, to really talk about conversations that are impacting our businesses. And today is one in HR and talent, a conversation that we are always diving into. So Kiana, introduce yourself and then segue into our fantastic speaker we have today.
All righty, good to have everybody here today, and so glad that you guys can join us. Again, my name is Kiana James, and I'm the VP dealing with our Business and Entrepreneur Committee. And I'm also the founder and owner with Friendly Faces Senior Care. And we know that hiring and recruiting is such a hot topic and something that many business owners, not only in the Pearland area, but pretty much across the US, are having challenges with. And so that's why we thought it was very important to bring this topic to the forefront. And so what I want to do is read a biography on our presenter today, who is Barry Deutsch. And he is a well-known thought leader in hiring and peak performance management. He is a frequent speaker at management meetings, trade associations, and CEO forums. Many of his clients view him as their virtual chief talent officer. He brings to the table a vast knowledge base of 35 years in the executive search field. He's responsible for raising the bar on hiring accuracy and bringing Six Sigma process improvements in hiring to numerous companies, from multi-billion-dollar Fortune 100 companies to entrepreneurial and middle market companies. Along with his partner, Barry specializes in coaching and advising CEOs and key executives in how to hire and leverage top performers. Their executive search firm and consulting practice, Impact Hiring Solution, includes workshop training for improving interviewing accuracy, coaching to define superior performance, and teaching companies how to fish for themselves and finding the very best talent available. He leads one of the most unique executive search companies in this country, focusing the hiring process on defining success and wrapping a systematic and rigorous business process around a successful profile. He has helped to raise hiring success and accuracy in a wide variety of companies over the last 35 years. They have presented to well over 35,000 CEOs and key executives over the last 2 decades. They've conducted over 1,000 executive searches and interviewed well over 250,000 candidates. And I thought I did a lot of interviewing.
Wow.
They are frequently sought out for their thought leadership in hiring and interviewing, and are well published and well recognized in hiring and recruiting top talent. Barry himself has co-authored 2 books, You're Not the Person That I Hired, and This Is Not the Position I Accepted. In addition, Barry has published extensively across the internet, including multiple blogs, business magazines, radio programs, and iTunes channel. He's earned a BA and MA from American University in Washington, D.C. And prior to his executive search career, he held increasing levels of responsibility in finance and general management with other companies. So that's a very extensive background on Barry. And we definitely want to thank you, Barry, for coming today, joining us, I think, all the way from California, to talk with our local Pearland community and also our group that we have online. So I want to turn it over to Barry, and he's going to present, if you're looking at your screen, You're Not the Person I Hired, the Success Factor Methodology Workshop. Thank you.
Thank you for that warm welcome. Kiana and I actually met a few months ago. A few months ago, was that what it was? When I came and spoke to her entrepreneurial forum or
Yeah.
group called Vistage. Some of you might be familiar with Vistage. I've been associated with that group now for probably 25 years. I've probably made over 1,500 presentations of this program in one form or another in that period of time. In fact, I just got back late last night from Charlotte, having done 3 programs back there. And Kiana's comment about, everybody's affected by issues of hiring. It doesn't matter whether you're in Charlotte, New Orleans, Southern California, everybody seems to be facing the same kinds of issues. This is the worst job market I've ever experienced. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've been through 5 or 6 major recessions. I would tell you that, the dot-com era of everybody complaining about trying to find people, the McKinsey thing about the war for talent pales in comparison to what many of us are experiencing today. I've never seen anything like this. In December of 2020, we were comparing the job market to the Great Depression. We were headed towards 20 million people unemployed in this country. And then in January, the job market strapped on rocket boosters, and we've been on a vertical ride since. There doesn't seem to be any slowdown in that pace. Unless nuclear war breaks out over Ukraine, or the Fed decides to actually crash the economy, which they seem to be well on the way towards, we probably have another 2 to 3 years of a continued rise in this job market. And every client I have across the country is screaming for people, from plant custodians to senior executives and everything you can imagine in between. So we're going to take what I would normally deliver in about a 3-hour format, and I'm going to cram it into about 45 to 50 minutes. I'm not going to go through every one of those slides, but I have an abbreviated program for that. We're going to cycle through some of the key points for it, and then we'll leave a few minutes at the very end for Q&A. If you've got a question or a thought as we're cycling this program, or I pose a question, you want to dig a little deeper into something, Jim's going to be monitoring the chat. And so I'd urge you to put your question, put your thought. If you got an example you want to share, you want to dig a little deeper into something, by all means, put that in there. And then Jim will raise his hand or interrupt me, and we'll try to deal with that both as we cycle through our program and at the very end where we'll save a few minutes. So before I jump into the tactics of how to do this, the 37 things I'd like to share with you that you could use to improve hiring accuracy and success, what I'd like to do is maybe take a couple of minutes and throw this back onto your shoulders and ask, what are a few of the things that are frustrating you or driving you nuts about finding, selecting, assessing, interviewing, measuring people in the interview process? So Jim, if you could take a look and see if anybody poses those questions, and then we'll just kind of read those off and I'll address them.
Barry, we've already heard people talking about ghosting and people, showing up for jobs and are agreeing to a job and never actually making it to the office. Ghosting is the term we're using nowadays in this part of it as well. So let me see what else is in there, but that was the first one.
So keep looking. I'm going to address the ghosting issue. Perfect. Why do you get ghosted? You get ghosted because the entire pool of candidates you're looking at are people who are responding to Indeed and ZipRecruiter ads. They're active candidates. You're posting your ad, but they've already been looking for 2 months. So they've gone out on 37 interviews. They've got 2 job offers sitting on the table. And unless your opportunity is dramatically more compelling than what they've already got, a bird in the hand kind of metaphor, they just ghost you. Yes, it's discourteous, but it's a function of supply and demand. It's what normally happens in an uptick market like the one we're in. So you either have to convince people that your opportunity is more compelling, or you have to change the pool of candidates you're going after to look at people who are not spewing their resume to every keyword that comes up through automated bots on these job boards. And you have to look at people who are open to leaving their current company, but they're selective. They're open to a good opportunity, and that's the group you can attract, and they're not going to ghost you because they don't need your job. They're open to a great opportunity, and if your opportunity is compelling, they'll raise their hand, they'll engage with you through the process. We're going to talk about that in much more depth. But as long as your entire pool are active candidates who are desperately seeking work by answering lots of ads online, you're doomed to this concept of being ghosted.
Which is a perfect segue that somebody wrote. One of the questions, they're most frustrated with the presentation of skills on resumes and then not delivering at the job. So
Right.
everybody's becoming professional resume writers, apparently.
Well, it's not only just in the resume. So one of the questions I frequently pose to groups is think back last 2 or 3 years, all the people you've met in the hiring process. Out of that entire group, what percentage do you believe outright lied to you, embellished, or exaggerated what they had done or what they thought they could do? Rarely do I hear less than 100%.
Wow.
Usually it's somewhere between about 120 to 140%. Now you're thinking, how does Barry come up with a number like that? It's because they do it more than once. 14 times on their job application, 22 times on their resume, 13 times in the phone interview. When people tell us what they've done, how they've done it, and what they can do, we got to be able to wrap our arms around that. And with a high degree of conviction, believe what they said versus, oh, I just hope you can make it through the next 90 days. At the end of our program, we're going to finish up with interviewing. I'm going to show you a technique to get to the truth that's the equivalent of sticking them into the lie detection equipment. It's so simple, you're actually going to want to slap yourself in the forehead that you haven't been doing it before. No tricks and no mirrors, no magic. It's just very straightforward, but I'm going to save it to the very end so I can keep everybody's interest focused for about the next 45 minutes. Jim, is there one more that popped up?
Let me scroll back in here, Barry, and see what I see.
We'll take one more and then we'll move into our tactics.
Yeah, and I'll just say one of the things that we're hearing is what's frustrating people is, and they didn't put this in the comments, but we have these conversations, is the new process of allowing more things to slide with employees, demerits, writing up arrival times, because they want to keep the talent there. When they used to say, you're 5 minutes late, you should be here on time, they're letting things like that slide because they have to maintain. They can't afford to lose that employee because they know what's going on the other side of things.
So this is a little off the topic of hiring, but It also relates to setting standards and expectations. You are what you tolerate. So if you have a culture of people showing up, being on time, being accountable, and you start to slack off on that, then the rest of your employees look at that and say, oh, it's okay to not perform. It's okay to show up late. It's okay to abuse the time policies. You are what you tolerate, and that sets your culture. And in most organizations, everybody ignores what you write in your employee handbook. They ignore all your communications, and all they do is observe the owner and the management team's actions, and they form their perception of the company culture based on those actions. So are you allowing some aberrant, dysfunctional, toxic, non-performing deadbeats to dictate what your culture is? And are you allowing that to determine it versus, as I'll use the TV metaphor, moving them off the island so that you can maintain and create the kind of culture and environment that you'd like? I can't make that decision. That's a value decision that each one of you have to make. But I find that many of my clients do not want to be whipsawed by individuals who are controlling or grabbing control of their culture. One of my favorite all-time articles is an article that was published probably 20 years ago in Harvard Business Review in that little case study section. And it was about a sales manager who was incredibly successful, but completely dysfunctional. And nobody could stand working with him. The title of the article was called, What a Jerk. Are you allowing jerks in your organization that are affecting everyone else? It's not about what that one person does, it's how it affects everybody else.
Right.
All right, let's jump into some of the tactics. And I'm going to start with a little bit of an overview on the accuracy of the hiring process. The research over the last 25 years shows that interviewing accuracy, as it's traditionally done in most companies and organizations, is at best 50%. Sometimes we make a good decision about people, sometimes we don't. It's completely random. One of the questions I've asked key executives, senior executives, business owners over the last 20 years in these 1,500 plus presentations that I've given is, what's your own track record? So take a moment And I want you to think back of all the people you've hired in your business. All of them. Out of that entire group, what percentage lived up to or exceeded your expectations, and what percentage missed? Most CEOs, senior executives, business owners have told me over the years that if they were batting 50-50, they thought they were doing a great job. Most have readily admitted to me that they think their success is around a quarter to a third. A quarter to a third on hiring people who deliver the results, outcomes, expectations, performance metrics, KPIs, and they do it with a set of behavior and style that's consistent with your value and culture. That's a horrible statistic. You can't build a successful company if your track record is a quarter to a third. So my question, my head scratching moment is, why don't we work on improving the process? Why don't we make it better? There's lots of best practices out there. I'm going to go through a few key best practices that will allow you to move hiring accuracy well into the 80 to 90% range. But why haven't we done this so far? Give you an example. If any process in your organization dropped below 95% in terms of accuracy, safety, timeliness, it could be the quality process, order entry, customer problem resolution, supply chain management, you'd probably throw a tiger team at it to solve it. Why is it when it comes to hiring, we basically accept random outcomes? Sometimes over the years, I've joked with my clients and said, you could have as much success the way you do this, not ever meeting candidates, posting resumes on the wall and throwing darts at them and selecting people that way, or rolling the dice and just blindly taking people on your company. It's just random, the process. And so one of the things we're going to talk about today is how do we create a simple structure that's repeatable and scalable so that it doesn't matter what role we're hiring for, whether it's a truck delivery person, a customer service rep, a senior manager, the process should be exactly the same versus us trying to recreate the wheel every time. And what I'd like to do is start with a couple of ideas that will immediately boost you 50% of the way towards that goal. So the first question is, would everybody consider measuring the ability to do the job, performance, is equally important to measuring fit? That they'll fit into your organization, they'll be a good teammate, they'll get along with everyone. Most people would say yes, they're absolutely equally important. So let's split these in half. Let's first take the performance piece. I'm a big proponent of show me you can do the work, don't tell me. I think one of the reasons interviewing fails in companies is that we sit in an artificial environment and we ask the 20 standard, stupid, inane, canned interview questions. We extrapolate what they're capable of doing from that, and then we make a decision to hire them. And sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong. It's pure random luck. If you want to boost your success in hiring, I recommend you start having people show you they can do the work. Now, what's the best framework of doing this? Temp to perm. There is no better process of hiring on earth than temp to perm. We're like going to the department store and trying on jeans, casting them aside if they don't fit. It's the same thing. Try people on, see how they work. If they don't work out, try another one. Yes, it's an expensive premium. You're going to pay 15% above their salary level to an agency to try temp to perm. But it's a great way to view people before you have to make a permanent decision. In fact, I'll go so far as to say, I would never again hire an unemployed individual. I would give them a 2-day assignment, 2 weeks, 2 months, try them on, play with them, see if it's going to be a good fit. The problem occurs when we're trying to hire people who have a job, they can't do the temp to perm thing with you. So how do we, in the context of a traditional interview, do this temp to perm kind of an assessment? And I'm going to call it show me, don't tell me. Let me break it down into 3 levels. Level 1A is the frontline employee. This is your basic fundamental minimum wage employee. Wait staff in a restaurant. It could be truck drivers, warehouse associates, clerks. It's the bottom of the totem pole kind of folks. Have them show you they can do the work. If you're hiring people who are going to solder electronic circuit boards, don't sit in the interview and talk about soldering. Put them on the workbench, give them a soldering iron, make them solder. If they're welding large steel tubes together for durable products, that's your business. Have them strap on the welding equipment and show you they can weld. You're hiring a forklift driver who claims they've been driving a forklift for 15 years. Don't just accept that. Put them in there with an experienced forklift driver and make them go through their paces. You're hiring a customer service rep. 1/3 of that interview should be a role play. You sit on that side of the desk and pick up your imaginary phone. I'll sit on this side and let's go through the 13 scenarios you're going to face on a daily basis from our customers. We'll learn more about the candidate in the role play than any amount of time we spend asking those 20 standard stupid and candidate questions like, what do you want to be when you grow up and what are your weaknesses? Oh, Barry, my greatest weakness is I just care too much. You're hiring a junior accountant or bookkeeper in the accounting department. One of the things you're going to assign to them is to do a monthly bank reconciliation. Instead of sitting in the interview and talking about doing a bank rec, put them in an office, give them Excel, hand them your last bank statement, and stand over their shoulder and watch them reconcile it in front of you. Every one of these jobs has 3 to 4 core skills that relate to metrics and KPIs of performance, whether they're an accounts payable clerk, they're a receptionist, they're a factory worker, they're a warehouse associate, a truck driver. We should be figuring out what's the skill we're trying to extract or measure. And then how do we design an observational assessment that shows us they can do that? I'll give you one last illustration before moving to the next category. Many of my clients have people work in a manufacturing environment where they're using basic power tools to do assembly or repair work. They'll set up a workbench. They'll have something for them to repair, like a motor, an HVAC system or something. They'll put the power tools on the workbench. They'll put the drill in reverse. They'll give the candidate an assignment. The candidate will go over, pick up the drill, and can't figure out why the screw won't go forward. This is someone who claims to have 15 years of working with mechanical process and tools. The test can be very simple to determine, are you faking it? Are you trying to con me? Or do you really know what you're talking about? Level 2, this is level B. This would be the professional job. This would be sales reps, marketing associates, financial analysts, project managers, developers, estimators, programmers. They're typically degreed. They're professional. They're individual contributors. They're not managing a team. They're the core of your higher level staff. There's a body of knowledge, and 90% of that job is problem solving. My favorite technique at this level is just to hand the pen to the candidate and make them go to the whiteboard. Why don't you walk us through that problem you worked on a few weeks ago? What was the issue? What was your role? How did you solve it? Kind of flow it out for us. How'd you make those assumptions? What was your role in the implementation? Oh, you know what, Jim, if you had been here 2 weeks ago, we had this specific problem we faced with one of our customers. We would have assigned this to you. How would you have set it up? And we just keep flipping back and forth in case studies, role plays, examples, illustrations, working illustrations. You're a real estate developer, or you're in the field of construction. Pull out the blueprints and start going through those with the candidate. Make it a working interview instead of asking these silly questions and then trying to extrapolate performance from it.
Barry, can I ask a quick question? Why do people, is it just a comfort level that they go back to the traditional 20 questions you keep mentioning? Or is it, is it just the comfort level? They don't want to try something new? Or what have you heard in your experience? Or is this a light bulb moment for most of your people?
It's a light bulb moment. One, we don't know what to do. We've never thought of this idea. It's so creative and new that it's like, wow, nobody ever suggested something like that before. And number two, we just don't want to spend the time doing it. We don't want to invest the time. And one of the biggest mistakes in hiring is not putting enough time into the process. I would suggest to you that having worked with 35 to 40,000 entrepreneurial, small business, emerging growth companies over the last 30 years, that most people don't want to invest time in this process. They want it to be easy. They want to run a generic job description on a generic job board like Indeed or ZipRecruiter, excuse me, and have people magically fall out of the sky into their lap. We want to spend the least amount of time talking to people in the interview process, and we want to try to shove 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag to get the most out of people for the cheapest price. And it just doesn't work that way. It takes an inordinate amount of effort to hire and build an exceptional team of people. Years ago, what started us down this path 20 some years ago is we commissioned a major research project actually in the Vistage community, the one that Kiana's part of. And the title of that study is called The Top 10 Mistakes That CEOs and Senior Executives Make in Hiring. It'll be in the appendix of the book I'm going to send you if you're interested in this material, or you can download it from our website. The top 3 mistakes out of those top 10 all relate to not spending enough time in the process. And we're going to address each of those in the next few minutes. We don't spend enough, number one, we don't spend enough time defining what we really want from people. Number 2, we don't spend enough time shaking the bushes for the best people. And number 3, we just don't spend enough time in the interview process validating, verifying, and vetting every single claim, accomplishment, and statement the candidate makes, so they think they can get away with lying, embellishment, exaggeration, and conning us. So my answer is, we got to put more time in. The final step, level C, is when you're hiring people at management levels where they're leading teams. And for this level, I recommend the final step of the interview process should be a homework assignment, where you take one of your key outcomes or deliverables, you pose it to the candidate, you ask them to come back, give them a few days, and you ask them to come back and make a PowerPoint presentation to you on what they would do to solve it. Let's pretend for a moment that you're hiring someone to lead operations. You're a manufacturer, assembler of product, and one of your biggest problems is your on-time deliveries to customers are not where you want them to be. You're at 86%, you need to be at 97%. So you might say to the candidate, we'd like you to come back now that we spent 2 or 3 sessions with each other and present how would you go about improving on-time deliveries from 86% to 97% over the next 12 months. What steps you would take, what would the timeline look like, what would the budget be, what would some of your pitfalls might be, what do you think some of our key issues are, what haven't we answered yet that we need to get to. 50% of the people you ask to do this will run screaming in the other direction. They can't do it, they're afraid to do it. And of the other 50% you ask that will do it, half of them will fail miserably. They'll self-implode. It'll almost be embarrassing seeing them do this, but it'll zero right in on who your best candidate is very quickly. 3 different ways of doing this, depending on the level of the job. 1/3 of your interview, 1/3 should be an observational assessment of can the candidate do the work. All right, so that's the performance piece. Let's now flip to the other side of the coin and look at the fit piece, which is dominantly an issue of personality. And I'll start this with a question. By a show of hands, I know you can't, I can't actually see your hands, but you visually kind of, think about this. How many of you believe that the persona that someone exhibits in the interview, how they come across, their vocal, their style, their behavior, their language, how they interact with you, that's exactly what they'll be like when they show up for work? Now, in 1,500 presentations, no one has ever put their hand up. So if that's not the candidate's true personality, which you just agreed with, what is that? What are we observing when we sit across the table and we talk to people? It's acting. You're seeing actors and actresses. How many of you have met a great actor or actress? You were in awe of their presentation during the interview, and 2 weeks after they started, faceplant right on the ground. Almost everybody's had that experience. That's how we got the title of this. You got seduced by a candidate and then realized after the fact, and even Jim made this comment early when we were looking at the chat comments, they didn't turn out to be able to do what you thought. We hired someone who was only partially competent. We measured how good of an interviewer they are, not how good of an employee they would be. How about the opposite? How many of you have ever met a candidate that was shy, reserved, cautious, uncomfortable, nervous, uptight, introverted? It was really awkward to extract information. You saw some spark, you decided to take a risk. Lo and behold, they actually turned out to be one of your best employees. Most of you have had that experience. How is this possible? How is it that sometimes the best interviewees, the ones who say all the right things to you in the interview, don't turn out to be your best employees? And sometimes the ones who literally suck at interviewing, they're horrible at it, they turn out to be your best employees. I'm going to suggest it's because we're measuring the wrong thing. We're focused on trying to measure their personality, which you've already agreed with me is not their real personality. So how do you get past this? And it's the one shortcut, the only shortcut I'm going to offer you for the whole process. I'm going to recommend that from this day forward, you never again hire someone until you put them through a personality profiling assessment. There's a few of these out there. I've used the most well-known ones, the DISC derivatives like culture index or predictive index. There's 3 or 4 that are a little more expensive, a little more in-depth, but no one should get hired, doesn't matter what the job is, until you put them through one of these tools. It's not a panacea. It doesn't predict performance. You still have to conduct a good success or performance-based interview. Excuse me, all it shows you is what someone's preferred work behavior is in a work setting. And that's a very important arrow in your quiver of tools, because trying to measure personality in the interview in anything less than 4 to 5 hours of interviewing is closet psychology. We're just guessing at it. I'm a big proponent of testing, because when we just do an interview, we just sit and talk to people, the accuracy is very low because of our own personal bias, emotions, miscommunication, misperceptions. I like the idea of wrapping other quantifiable forms of assessment around the interview to validate, verify, and vet is what I heard and saw in the interview really the truth. These could include things like cognitive intelligence testing, skill testing, sales aptitude testing. There's a variety of these out there, and I would urge you to think about maybe looking at them, testing them, taking them yourself to see if they would be valuable parts of your hiring process.
Barry, if just as you go through that slide, it just made me think of, I love the NFL and football. Even during that evaluation process that they do all this back work, there is still a test that they take, the Wonderlic test, which is that's part of the process of evaluation, so that they can, even the NFL who's looking at quarterbacks and athletes, they're looking at that level as well. So you can learn something from other organizations as well.
Jim mentions this Wonderlic assessment, which is the gold standard for cognitive intelligence testing. It's a 50-question time test of 12 minutes. It's 5th grade math, but it's all relational and number sequences, word formation, geometric shapes. It doesn't measure IQ. It measures the process to absorb information and then logically and rationally process it. And it's the gold standard in this country for measuring that. I wouldn't necessarily recommend you give it to every one of your employees, but for people in roles like financial analysts, estimators, developers, programmers, architects, IT professionals, where there's a high degree of rational logic thinking, that may be an assessment you want to use to measure people. I have a wealth of content that I can share with you, and I'm going to go through this. If you're interested in it, you can email me directly at Barry, B-A-R-R-Y, at impacthiringsolutions with an S at the end, .com. Just say I was in the chamber meeting this morning and I'd like some of the content. And I'll send you a copy of the slide deck. I'll send you a little feedback form that if you have an immediate issue, I'm more than happy to discuss that with you or walk you through it or give you some additional content. I'll send you a copy of our book in PDF format. This is 250 pages that follows the same format I'm flowing through in this 45-minute to hour presentation, but it's got all the academic research, examples, case studies, illustrations, questions, issues, more depth than I can ever begin to touch in this program. I'll give you a coupon. This coupon entitles you to a complimentary conversation with moi on anything we cover today, and there's no expiration date. Most folks who hear me talk don't exercise their coupon for 7 years. It's usually when I hear back from someone, oh, Barry, I remember you presenting 7 years ago. Could you help me with this issue? I'm 64 years old. I'm getting tired of fitting into little airplane seats to fly all over the country. I don't know if I'm going to be doing this when I'm 70. So hint, you might want to use that coupon sooner. I'm going to give you a little audio summary of this program. 20, 30 minutes, 9 tracks, minute and a half each track, soundbite bullet points. What I'm trying to do is overcome this speaker adage that goes something like, you're going to forget 90% of this material in 48 hours. How do I help you sustain and use this for years to come? And then I have a series of templates which will help you put some structure and rigor around your hiring process, like a reference check summary form, a form for defining success for different positions, a 20-minute performance-based phone interview, and a candidate scoring tool that you can fill out after the interview that helps you accurately judge whether to move forward with the candidate. We're actually going to end our program with that tool today. It's called the 8-point success matrix. So if you're interested in all of this material, just send me a little note and say, Barry, I was in the chamber program. Could you please send this to me, and I'll pop that off to you. Let me lay out a process for hiring. For 30 years, we've been using an 8-step process in our executive search practice. You'll see that in the appendix of the book I'm going to send you. 20 years ago, many members of these different entrepreneurial forums, excuse me, I've been talking too much in the last couple of days. Many folks asked us, teach us how to do this. You know, the old biblical phrase, teach us how to fish on our own, so we don't have to pay your exorbitant fee every time we want to do this. So we narrowed this down to 5 key things. And for the last 20 years, this is what we have been pitching, preaching, proselytizing across the world. You do these 5 things, these best practices. There's nothing creative here that we've come up with, but you do these 5 things and you can raise hiring accuracy into the 80 to 90% range. Number 1, the most important part of the process is to define what success looks like in the job. Number 2, if we want to bring better people to the table, we have to do things that are outside of posting generic job descriptions to generic job boards. That's completely dysfunctional in this kind of an economy. And what it does is bring the bottom third of the candidate pool to your doorstep. Everybody else is rejects, retreads, dysfunctional, toxic, non-performing deadbeats. Now, granted, there's an old adage in the hiring field that goes something like, even a blind squirrel can get a nut sometimes. But building your company, a team, building a high-performing team is really tough when your entire strategy is predicated on hope and luck. Number 3, what do we ask? What do we do when we're in the interview? Most people use as I was mentioning before, the 20 standard stupid inane can't interview questions. Where'd they get these from? They got them from when they were interviewed. Barry, 17 years ago, when I got my first job, these were the questions I was asked, and I'm still using them today. What do those sound like? Tell me about yourself. Why are you here today? What do you know about us? What do you want to be in 5 years? What are your strengths and weaknesses? Oh, Barry, my greatest weakness is I just care too much. I work too hard. They all know you're going to ask these questions, or we lead them. We say things like, oh, one of our greatest values, a key piece of our culture is how people work together and collaborate in teams. How do you feel about working in a team? And then we scratch our head after the fact, wondering, why did we make a mistake? So we'll talk about what are the right questions to ask. Number 4, now we're done with the interview. Now we're going to compare candidates. Jim and Kiana are interviewing Julie. Julie leaves the interview. Jim and Kiana go out in the hallway, meet up at the proverbial water cooler. Jim turns to Kiana and asks, what does he ask? So what do you think? Right? You guys have probably done this a few times. So what do you think?
Yeah.
And what do we usually hear from that? We hear things like, I liked her, I liked him, they seemed pleasant, they appeared enthusiastic, might be a good fit. Worthless crap at 40,000 feet. This was nothing more than a hi, how are you meet and greet. From this point forward, no more water cooler, so what do you think conversations. From this point forward, we're going to use some form of a structured scoring tool to measure the candidate. And then finally, as the 5th step of the process, we're going to wrap our interview in other forms of like deep and intrusive reference checks, background checks, homework assignments, personality assessments, the Wonderlicks, cognitive intelligence testing. 5 simple steps to make hiring a systematic and rigorous process. Let me run through a few of these in a little deeper detail over the next few minutes. Why do we publish job descriptions on job boards? Because they describe the absolute rock bottom minimum of work or expectations. Instead of telling people what success looks like, what excellence is in a job, we tell people what the absolute rock bottom minimums we're willing to tolerate. Why do we do that? You know what the most common answer is? Barry, if we told the outside world what success for a customer service rep would look like, nobody would respond. So instead, let's dummy it down, make it stupid, set the absolute rock bottom minimum so we can fill the funnel of candidates with lots of average and mediocre people. Sounds kind of dysfunctional when I describe it that way, doesn't it? We want to define what is success. What does that look like in terms of outcomes, deliverables, expectations, results, quantifiable metrics, KPIs that are stretched over 12 months, 9 months, 6 months, 3 months. That's the most important part of the process. Let me give you a different perspective on this. The research shows out of the Gallup organization that half your employees have no clue what you expect from them. There's no written, documented list of 3 to 6 outcomes, deliverables, and expectations. It's all generic platitudes and ambiguity. Work harder, think smarter kind of thing. And it's the number one reason why hiring fails. It's the number one reason of not doing this, why your performance management or accountability is so low. And it is more important than those two. It's the number one reason why people disengage, why they turn off, why instead of giving you their full productive effort, they give you the rock bottom minimum they think you'll tolerate to allow them to stay on the payroll system. So defining success is more than just hiring. It's the core of people management in every organization. And the reason most people don't do this, I can see the words forming on Jim's lip. Why don't people do this? It's because it's hard work. It takes an hour to 2 hours to do for every job. An hour to 2 hours. It's just as hard to define this for a forklift driver, what success looks like, as it is for a senior executive in charge of sales. A couple of reference points. First, when you ask for the book and I send it to you, the first chapter I'd like you to jump to is the chapter on defining success. 30 to 40 pages of incredible granular depth, step by step on how you would do this. Number two, if you have not read this book, I urge you to get it the second we're done today. It is my Bible of extracting productivity from people and engaging your employees. It is the foundational research of everything that's been published in the last 15 years about employee happiness, satisfaction, engagement, performance, productivity. It was written by 2 of the senior executives of the Gallup Point organization about 12 to 15 years ago. It was on the bestseller list for 2 years. Every single page has a golden nugget on it. And the very first issue that they talk about is you need to define success, otherwise people start putting their foot out the door. The 2 current statistics that are quite scary is, number one, 50% of the people in your organization are unhappy. They're dissatisfied, they're disengaged, and that mirrors the other statistic that's coming out in research over the last 6 months, which is 50% of the people who work for you are looking for a new job. 50% are unhappy, 50% are looking for a new job. They almost go hand in hand. Those are easy to fix. And the number one way to fix it is to help people understand what's expected of them. Let me give you 2 examples. At the management level or senior staff level, where you hold people accountable to business outcomes, we want to define work that using a technique we call soaring. What's the issue? What are the obstacles preventing us from getting there? What are the action steps we're going to take to overcome that? And what are the results or yardstick that we use to measure that by? We call it soaring. I have a worksheet that I'll send you that helps you walk through this. Let me show you what the output of that exercise would look like. A few years ago, I'm doing a search project for a client, not a search project, I'm visiting a group and I'm presenting this program. End of the program, CEO runs up to me, the business owner, and says, I love this stuff. I'd love to implement it. The problem is I just fired my incompetent head of sales. I know you do executive search. Could you help me? And I'm like, no, I really, yeah, sure. So that afternoon, we're about to sit down. At lunchtime, he pulls out this dirty old envelope. And on the left-hand side, he starts to map out a traditional job description. You guys have probably seen this before. I want someone with 8 to 10 years of industry experience, a BS in a technical discipline, this skill, this knowledge. Looked like an unfurling toilet paper roll of prerequisites and pre-qualifications. Then we go in the conference room with 4 members of the management team. They lock the doors. 2.5 hours later, we come out. And on the right-hand side, they went through 4 key things that this person had to deliver back to the organization. They walked through on each one the SOAR analysis. What's the issue? What are the obstacles preventing us from getting there? What are the action steps we're going to take? And then what's the metric or outcome that we're going to use to determine were we successful or did we fail at it. They took those R's and they put them on one page. There were 4 of them. That's what we call a success factor snapshot. That supplants the traditional job description. So here's my question to you all. When you look at these 2 columns, does that look like the same job? On the left-hand side, we're defining the inputs, what you should show up with. And on the right-hand side, we're defining what you should produce, what your outcomes should be. They're radically different. Most of the time, we don't measure ability to get those outcomes. We check the boxes on the left-hand side and then pray, because you have those boxes checked, you might be able to get me these results. And that's the #1 reason why hiring fails. Let me give a different perspective. So most of your employees aren't managers or executives. They're staff. They're worker bees. They're packing boxes. They're driving trucks. They're talking to customers on the phone. How do we determine what success looks like at that level? KPIs, key performance indicators and metrics. Every single job has 3 to 4 of these. Our goal is to define what is that for a customer service rep? What does it look like for an accounts payable clerk? What would it be for a field tech? Here's an example for a customer service rep. There's probably 30 of these that you could use. This is just 3. What are we measuring people's success against? Is it objective? Is it rational? Do they buy into it? Are they willing to be held accountable to it? This is the #1 issue again in hiring, performance management, and in employee retention and engagement.
So Barry, and just to these KPIs would be part of the job description early on in the process. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. You can build a little box at the bottom of your job descriptions. You can attach it as a supplement to the job description. There's lots of different ways to do this without throwing your traditional job descriptions out the window. Let's shift now to talk about finding people. As I mentioned before, posting generic job descriptions on generic job boards like ZipRecruiter and Indeed bring the bottom third of the candidate pool to your table. That job description that you're posting is not a marketing statement. It's not compelling. It's not a magnet to attract people. In fact, it's a back office, administrative, regulatory compliant, boring, mundane, disgusting, revolting, repulsive tool to try to attract good people. When great performers, people who don't need your job, they're doing well, but they're open to a better opportunity. Remember, 50% of all candidates are open to leaving their current company right now. When they see your job description masquerading as an advertisement, they take their hand and put it down. You never get to see them. You're left with the reject pile. You're left with the folks who can't hold a job, who are desperate for work, who are unemployed in this kind of a market, which is hard to believe. So how do we attract that better group of candidates? We do it through first writing what we call a compelling marketing statement. I have a whole chapter of this in our book, 30 to 40 pages, titled, the chapter's titled, and this is the second chapter I want you to go to, titled, How to Attract the Bottom Third of the Candidate Pool. Now, if we were all together, that would have generated hysterical laughter. I can't see you guys laughing on the Facebook feed, but we want to develop an attraction marketing tool. And I guess the way I'd summarize this whole process is stop thinking like sticking a warm butt in a chair. Start thinking like a marketeer. What are the tactics, techniques, strategies you use to bring customers and clients to your doorstep? We're going to use the same principles to bring great people forward. And it starts by developing a compelling marketing statement and attraction marketing tool. It has 4 components: a compelling headline or grabber, a challenge question that gets right at the heart of why would you want to leave your current job and come to work for us, a painting a picture of the vision of the future of what this candidate is going to do to help you achieve that vision, path, or direction, and then finally 2 or 3 of your key success factors of what you're measuring the person against. Numerous examples on our website, an entire chapter in our book of doing this. And when you first start to write one of these, I want you to send it to me. The hardest part of this process is overcoming using the idea of a job description to attract people. I want to break you of that habit. The first one you do is going to be painful and cathartic. Then it gets pretty easy after that. But to start that, I want you to send me it. You can use your coupon for this. Send it to me. I'll look at it. I'll mark it up. I'll make some changes. I'll suggest to you how to improve it to start you down that path. Once you've written your compelling marketing statement, the next question becomes, what do we do with it? And there are 4 key best practices. Number 1, never again post a job description. From now on, you're going to post your compelling marketing statement. Generic job boards, specialty job boards, the educational listservs, many universities maintain these, whether you're looking to hire someone with a degree in biology or project management and construction, or you're looking for someone, a mechanical engineer. Many of the specific universities and local universities maintain in those different departments listservs that you can post to. Continuing education sites, online forums, the chamber. Does anybody, are you part of any professional associations? That effort of putting the word out, posting it in places where your ideal candidate might see it, should be no more than 10% of your effort. 10%. Most companies put 99.9% of their effort into this category. This is blind squirrel gets a nut. Stick it out there and wait to see what drops out of the rafters. For a $500 sponsored out on Indeed, if you could fill the job, gosh, you're done. You don't have to worry about it anymore. But it doesn't always work like that. So there are other things we need to do. Number 2, referrals. This should be 50% of your effort to find a great person is driving referrals. Every hiring study I've looked at in the last 20 years shows that referrals make better employees. There's a whole we could spend 2 hours just on this one subject. There's a whole variety of tactics and steps, but the focus should be in driving better referrals, both internally and externally. Number 3, I consider 1 degree of separation. You're all familiar with 6 degrees, right? We're all connected to Kevin Bacon at 6 levels. We can reach anybody on the planet in 6 calls. That's ridiculous. If we had to go through 6 people to get 1 candidate, we'd be dead before the job got filled. I believe in 1 degree of separation. If Jim is the guy I want to go after, I want to think about where are all the places that Jim connects and interacts with people who are just like him. What alumni associations does he belong to? What does he do in a nonprofit world? What are his hobbies, his interests? How does he show up and affiliate with others who have the same kind of background and interests, online, offline? I'm going to reach into each one of those groups. I'm going to touch Jim. Jim's not the guy we're going to hire, but he's going to lead me to the person on the right and the person on the left. Birds of a feather flock together. This gets easier the higher up the professional food chain you go.
Barry, is that a direct ask in that situation, or do you go on LinkedIn and see what they're involved in? So is it a direct ask to the person? How do you get to that? Just curious.
You're working through groups.
Okay.
You're working through associations. You're posting something on the bulletin board in the local church. You're sending it out through the group leaders like you, Jim. You're a member of the chamber. You probably know other members that might be interested in new opportunities, or the membership chair of a particular professional association. So you're working through groups and the contacts in the groups. This last one is direct sourcing. So by now, almost every professional and manager has put some version of their resume into their LinkedIn profile. And with a high degree of accuracy, you can pinpoint exactly who you want to talk to. And when you send a nice, warm, friendly note to someone on LinkedIn, "Hi, Jim, I came across your background the other day. We're trying to fill a role for a supply chain manager. I'm impressed by some of the things you've done. Would you be open to spending a couple minutes with me networking about this opportunity?" And when you send a nice, warm, friendly note like that, 50% of the people you send it to will do the proverbial "let me close my office door." You do these 4 things on a concurrent basis, and I guarantee it, within a 2 to 4 week period, you will fill your funnel with outstanding people. Why do we make mistakes and errors in hiring? Another reason is desperation hiring. We post our job onto Indeed.com. We leave it up for 30 days. In those 30 days, you manage to poll the best of the worst, or what one of my clients in a presentation 2 days ago called the cream of the crap. You get to the end of that, the job board ad expires, and you consider reposting it. You put it back up, and you pull the same exact group again. Now what are we feeling? We're feeling desperation. Our whole thought process just went from, I want to hire an A-class great person for this job so I can build a tremendous team, to 30 days later, your thought process is better a warm butt in that chair, because at least I can get something done versus me doing that job in addition to my own job. Desperation hiring, where we lower our standards, we sub-optimize, we dummy down the job just to get the job filled, sets in when your funnel dries up. When you realize you're not going to see any better candidates than the ones you've already seen. So hopefully I've given you a few ideas to how to expand that funnel and fill it with great people. Let's finish in the next couple of minutes with our last topic, which is interviewing. And there's really three things we want to do in interviewing. How do we minimize first impressions? What do we do in the interview? And how do we get to the truth? One of the questions I'll pose in groups is, how long does it take to make a first impression? And most people will say seconds, nanoseconds, the instant you meet people. It's almost comical how fast it occurs. And then most people spend the rest of the interview validating their first impression. Probably one of the most powerful things that you can do, so that the out of order sign doesn't start flashing on your forehead, where you meet someone, you fall in love, you abdicate interviewing, you fling it out the window, then you immediately start selling someone on the job or talking about nonsensical things. The number one best practice is to write your interview questions down. Never again conduct an interview without listing the 4 to 6 core questions you're going to ask the candidate. As Kiana mentioned in the introduction, I've been involved in over 250,000 interviews in 30 years. To this day, every time I interview a candidate, I do 30 to 40 interviews a week in my search practice, I write the questions down. Sounds trite, but it's the number one best practice that prevents you from going down rabbit holes, getting lost, and getting to the end of the interview and not realizing I didn't really learn anything more about this person. We have developed, after seeing these 250,000 candidates, we've tracked their careers, and we've seen why some people succeed and some fail. We've identified 5 key things that lead to success. 5 key elements. Now, the chapter in our book on interviewing goes into all the academic and rational and research and studies that have been done to identify these, but here are the questions that come from that. Number 1, more important than anything else, is initiative and self-motivation. It's the number 1 governor of success. Notice the first question. Can you give me an example where you went above and beyond the call of duty? You did something more than what was required of you. You took initiative. You showed proactivity. 4th question. Remember my example before of improving on-time deliveries? One of our critical success factors is we need to improve on-time deliveries from 86% to 97%. What have you done that's most comparable or similar? Now, these 5 questions that should be asked of every candidate, they're important, but they're not nearly as important as this next piece. And we call it the Pinocchio effect. How do we minimize the lies, embellishment, and exaggeration? Why do people lie to you in the interview? Why do they make up stories? Why do they misrepresent what their real job title was, what they actually did, how they performed, and why do they claim credit of what other people did? Because they know you're never going to check. You're not going to probe. You're not going to dig in. You're not going to try to validate it. So they feel they can get away with it. You have to put them on notice. You're not going to let that happen. Now, as a recruiter, if it was up to me, I'd just stick them right into the lie detection equipment. Unfortunately, I think there's a couple of federal regulations that prevent you from doing this. So here's the next best 2 things. From this point forward, when a candidate opens their mouth in the interview and words spew out, I want you to have a knee-jerk, visceral, gut level reaction. And it goes like this. Could you give me an example of that? Could you illustrate that for me? Could you give me a specific? Never again allow a candidate to say something to you in the interview that's ambiguous, generic, superficial, platitudes, 50,000 feet in the air without literally, boom, can you give me a specific example of that? That's step 1. Step 2 is we're going to take the example and rip it apart. And the best way to do this, to probe, is to remember Kipling's 5 favorite friends. Who, what, where, when, how. Just keep asking those questions. When did this occur? Who else was on the team? What was your specific role? What was the biggest problem you ran into? How did you measure success on that? Now, what's the good news here? You don't have to ask 12 to 15 probing questions. All you have to ask is 3 to 4. By the third or fourth question, it's either going to hang together. You'll know they did it, they were hands-on, they understand what to do and how they would translate it in your environment, or they will literally self-implode, internally combust, melt down before your very eyes in seconds. I have yet to meet a candidate who can fake their way through this. Yeah, they may con you with the example. They may snow you on the first level of probing, but by the time you're 3 to 4 probing questions into it, they either did it or they didn't do it, and it'll be obvious within seconds. Last piece. Remember we talked about no more water cooler conversation? No more, so what do you think of Susan? From now on, we're going to use a structured scoring tool. I know this is a little hard to read on the PowerPoint presentation, but I actually have a Word document. This is the most popular thing we have ever created in 20 years. Our clients love this. Let me show you how it works. Jim and Kiana are interviewing Susan. Susan leaves the interview. Jim turns to Kiana after the interview, and instead of saying, so what do you think? He looks down at his score sheet and says, line 2, initiative and self-motivation. I give Susan a 1. You gave her a 2. What did you hear that I didn't hear? And all of a sudden, our entire conversation shifts from platitudes, generalities, and ambiguities to facts, quantification, examples, illustrations. Everybody knows Jim's going to go one by one down this list. What was your score? What were the 2 to 3 examples you gave? The real value of this tool is not the scoring. It's that it forces a fierce conversation among the team interviewing the candidate of, did we ask the right questions? Did we collect enough data? And we all heard the same example. Why are we evaluating it differently? 5 simple steps to make hiring a systematic and rigorous process in your organization. Jim, I'll turn it back over to you. We're right at the end of our time together.
I had to find my unmute. Barry, I'm going to start off and say great information. I think, as you said, this is a different, new way to look at the entire hiring process, where a lot of individuals want to go back to what they did their first interview. You know, what makes you such a great person, but you're not willing to dive into it. And I personally want to say, before I turn over to Kiana, is that I like that you broke it down to the 3 levels. That yes, there is the ability to the drill analogy that you use, but you had it for all 3 different levels. Not just, you think, okay, they need to know how to drive a forklift, but there are all the different skill sets and the examples that you can do it. So, front desk, when you talk about those skill sets, I guess my question to you, Barry, is I'm thinking of those entry-level positions that are more professional based. Is it, you mentioned the mock phone conversation? Is there any other examples that you have for those people that are just trying to, those customer service ones that you maybe, and that's what I'm just kind of get to. I'll stop there, Barry.
Role plays, situational examples, case studies, working interviews where you actually bring out the spreadsheet, the construction documents, and you're working through a real-time issue with someone. The more you can make the interview resemble what it's going to be like to do the work, the higher your accuracy. Worst case, let's say you can't do this, you can't figure it out. Worst case, you would have the candidate that you want to hire spend one entire day or shift with the person who's currently doing the job.
Wonderful. Thank you, Barry. Kiana, questions? I was looking at the chat, Barry. I think I'll tell you this much. The comments are amazing, great, asking for emails. And so we do hope people will reach out to you. Your email is in the Facebook Live chat. Reach out to Barry, get it, tell me you're part of the Pearland Chambers presentation, and get that coupon for that conversation. So Kiana, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yep, that's exactly what I was going to say. Just make sure that you reach out to him or reach out to the chamber, since he offered some leave behinds, a coupon, some information, which is great. And we just want to thank you, Barry. That was wonderful. And let everybody know, if you didn't catch the whole presentation, this will be posted on the Facebook page. Just look under videos so you can access it at any time. And I'm probably going to rewatch it multiple times, because a lot of nuggets there. And then he also talked about some books that he recommended as well, which are excellent. I know in your presentation, I had a couple of my managers get those books and they've been reading them. And various times they'll say, well, in the book, it says XYZ. So highly want to recommend those, and just want to thank you, Barry, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I just want to finish by saying, I hope everybody, I want to wish you much success. Notice I didn't say luck, much success in both hiring and retaining the best team of people you can in the coming years. Thank you all very much.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye, guys.
everybody.
Thank you all so much.